So with Dutch, Dutch would say, like he would like to listen and ask, hey, how you doing there, Kiri? And when I started telling him my stories of hustling tickets and working the streets and being at Madison Square Garden and in Penn Station with these characters, and when he started hearing names like Pigface Stanley and his son, little Scotty the baboon, and started hearing about Blockhead and Blockhead and Silent Sydney, and Freddie the Weeper and the Camel. There was a guy, the Camel. If I'm going to talk about him for a little while, Dutch eventually, I'd be in the car with him. He didn't used to like to drive with the other guys, if possible. So I would drive with Dutch and we'd be going to a show. We weren't always there, but on the weekends we'd be there. And Dutch, I'm just going to remind you something if you haven't heard this. Every show we'd go to, about 2 miles before the show, he knew we'd go to Humacao, and Dutch would know, there's a McDonald's like about 2 miles out. He'd go, hey, Carrie, go to that McDonald's there. I just want to get a coffee. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And every time Dutch would say, hey, Kiri, I only got a 20. It was like $1.25. But Dutch would say on these rides, he'd say, I'd be asking him, oh man, with Andy Kaufman, and I'm trying to get into these minute details. This is the second time he came, and the third, and how did he's like, yeah, let me hear more about that Camel. So the Camel, when I was hustling tickets at Penn Station, at the Garden, and I'd referenced earlier that, Penn Station was the meeting place. There didn't have to be an event. You would just gather. It was like checking into work downstairs. That flight, you probably even familiar with that elevator flight on 32nd Street, if it's still there like that. I think it is. And there were different crews of guys. There were like the old timers. There were these certain kids that younger crew from Long Island. There were these black hustlers that would come in from the Bronx. There were some old school black guys. They were just old school, and there was an influx, but there were very few loners. Because you sort of, if you went out on the street on your own, there were certain guys that were like shakedown artists. There was very little, the scalpers, there was never a lot of fighting. There was a lot of threatening. And there was a few bad guys that if you were out on the street suddenly at a Ranger game and you didn't belong, because you hadn't paid, like paying your dues, they would chase you, by intimidate, they'd intimidate, get off the corner, this kind of stuff. And unless you stood up to them or you had some backup, like I had Freddie the Weeper, was like, because I wasn't equipped to take on some of these guys. There were very few loners. I mean, some guys worked by themselves, but they'd been around a long time. It makes me think of a guy like Ronnie the Pole. He would just come in for like a Ranger game or a Giant game. There was Ernie the Hat. He was a specialist in Lincoln. He used to like to go to the opera.
Really?
Lincoln Center.
Wow.
So these guys, and then there was another guy. He's still around. And I have some video of an interview I did with the great Ragamuffin.
I remember Times Square, the video you did. Yeah.
Ragamuffin was another guy. There were guys that didn't want to be bothered. Well, one such guy. So I'm there at every, there was a period of time where I was there at virtually every event.
And this is 86, 87?
Yes, 87, 88, 89. I was at every, most events at the Garden. If I wasn't out on an all-night binge of something of that nature, I would check into work, whether it was a basketball game, a concert, tennis, it didn't matter. Or if there wasn't a Garden event, we'd go to Radio City or down to the Palladium or the Beacon and or Nassau or the Meadowlands, wherever we had to go. So I would still go to wrestling was big. It was a big ticket back then. We're talking about, the Piper Hogan era, right? Post MTV era, but it was big, and it would sell out every month. And there was money to be made with tickets, and I used to love to go, of course.
Yeah.
So I noticed this guy over the months. There was this strange man that was lurking around, and I would always, and it's like after a while, you just, you got to pay attention, because I would know which guys, to sort of stay away from, that would like bother me a little. I would know which guys, would help me, like phony pops.
Oh,
We'll get to him.
yeah. Okay.
I would know which guy, you had to know who the undercover cops were too. They would send out the same undercover cops. So and so you had to know. So I would eventually, I saw this one guy at the wrestling a few times, and he was like selling tickets, but really like quietly and really, almost like I'm like, what's he doing? And the other strange thing, when I saw this man, and it didn't dawn on me till like the third or fourth month, was the guy would hold a small handkerchief like that, my dad used to have like in his back pocket.
Yeah.
My father used to get so pissed off if I would sneeze, right? Like, I just sneeze like, Jesus Christ, I have a goddamn handkerchief, right? Do you have a handkerchief?
No, meanwhile, no one in 2019 or 2020
but
is
you know
carrying
that.
Yeah.
So this guy who I don't ever think I found out his real name.
Really?
I think he was some kind of Arab descent, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, this is crazy. This is a whole nother world. I mean, and I'm sure you were calling him this, and I'm sure everybody was. This is how much of a different world it was then.
Well, when I got to, I don't know how the first approach came, but there was a big wrestling event, and it was at the Garden. It wasn't like a pay-per-view, but it was like a Monday night. It was sold out, and I saw him going back and forth to the window, and he had another guy. Once in a while, he had another guy with him. Turns out I found out what the guy's nickname was Boufe.
Boufe. Do we know it? Wow. Okay.
Because when I got to know the Camel a little, and this guy was earlier once in a while, Camel would speak, I guess, Arabic, or maybe he was Syrian. Maybe it wasn't Hebrew. I would have recognized that, but some kind of Middle Eastern dialect. And this guy would go, oh, okay, Boufe. And he would
send off his assistant?
Yeah, he would send.
Wow.
So we named, once we got to know the Camel, we named the other guy Boufe. It's like BOUFF. Soft E.
Soft, silent E. So this is blowing my mind, because obviously now this is, the implications of the name and this, and back then though, I'm sure there was all kinds of crazy nicknames, and you've already mentioned a few of them.
Well, sure. And so the Camel, at one of these events, I just walked up to him. I said, "Are you selling tickets, or you got tickets, or you need tickets?" And he's like, He had the handkerchief, and it's like, as I asked him, he starts backing up, and he goes, "Oh, I have a few to sell. Will you help me?" I'm like, "What do you want for them?" They were like $15 tickets. He goes, "The 30 each," and I'm like, "No, man, I'm hustling, And he didn't distinguish the fact that I was a hustler, or he knew I was a hustler, but he was asking too much. Anyway, I got to know the Camel, and he would only come and buy and sell wrestling tickets.
Really?
We wouldn't see him. I mean, Elton John would be there for 3 nights. Metallica would be there.
And they were getting huge.
Huge.
Yeah, they were getting huge.
Right?
Yeah.
Camel would only come.
Only for wrestling.
And sometimes they weren't sometimes they were good. In the summer, it's sort of the business went down a little.
And even that one summer, they were in the Meadowlands and in Long Island, because
we're going to get to that.
Okay. Because the Garden was under repair.
So eventually I got to know him, but I didn't really know him well. So I would see him. We might have had a half-assed conversation. He always had, the other reason, the way he got the real Camel moniker was because when he would the only time he would remove the handkerchief, he had like a slight split in his front teeth, and he would spit a straight line of spit, like a camel style. right?
Wow.
And so that's when the handkerchief would come down,
Oh my goodness.
right?
You would think he might.
Well, I was hanging out with this other guy. I mean, I was hanging out with a lot of guys, but Freddie the Weeper, and there was this other guy, Baby Dumplings.
And watch time.